We've been conducting the typical normal training you would see from a V-22 squadron, doing everything from confined area landings into landing zones, flying support of the ground troops that are here in Okinawa. One of the key differences that we've been doing here in Okinawa is supporting all the theater security cooperation exercises, such as Cobra Gold, operating in the Philippines, Guam, and mainland Japan. The missions that we conduct during the exercises are very similar. One of the key differences is how we get there. With the Osprey, we fly ourselves there, typically using aerial refueling from a C-130. With the 46s, they would have to embark upon usually a Navy ship or commercial shipping and then get shipped to the exercise site.
Like
an LHD ship, or sometimes they would actually put them on commercial ships and move them to the exercise by commercial shipping.
So
Camp Hansen is where most of the landing zones are located, where we do our typical landing zone operations. It's also where the ground combat troops are located, and one of our key missions is to support those ground combat troops. So we spend a lot of time at Camp Hansen in support of those ground forces. One of the key capabilities that we have at Ieshima is a simulated amphibious landing ship area where we can practice landing on the ship prior to actually conducting those operations at sea. I think it's probably about the same. Now, the training syllabus is very similar from a CH-46 to a MV-22 when it comes to landing zone operations or shipboard operations. I think one of the big differences is that because of the increased range that this aircraft has brought, we're able to operate off of Okinawa far more frequently, operating on mainland Japan, Guam, the Philippines, and flying all the way to exercise Cobra Gold in Thailand. I think that's probably one of the biggest differences that you would see in day-to-day operations. From a capability standpoint, with the increased range, we have the ability to much more rapidly respond to humanitarian assistance or a disaster operation, or to any other contingency that we might be called upon to execute. Yes, correct. We can go about 700 nautical miles without refueling, and then with aero refueling we can extend that pretty much almost indefinitely, as long as we can keep the airplanes flying with pilots in the seat. With the 46, they can go about 200 to 300 miles before they have to stop and refuel. So if they're going to go any significant distance, they have to go via ship or have multiple fuel stops along the way. And in an island such as Okinawa, there aren't that many fuel stops on the way to anywhere from Okinawa. So far, we've operated out of Iwakuni, and one of the things we've primarily done up there has been navigation routes. Here on Okinawa, since the island is so small, we don't have the ability to fly longer range navigation routes over land, and we do have that capability up there at Iwakuni. It's one of the key skills we need to be able to move around any sort of country in which we would operate for contingency operations or disaster relief, and it's a skill that we practice regularly there in Iwakuni now, and back in the United States all the time. So far, we've been up there 2 times to execute that training, and we will return there as we need to. One of the key things that we try to do when we do these exercises, such as in the Philippines or in Thailand, is do that same similar type of training, that navigation route training. So if I do an exercise in 1 month, I may not need to go to Iwakuni that month because I got that training done already in Thailand or in the Philippines. I would think it would be no more than once a month, but it's going to vary from month to month. Some months it may be 3 times a month, and the next month it may be none. So it's going to vary by what the squadron is doing in that particular month. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase the capabilities that this aircraft brings to the Pacific area of operations. It drastically increases our capability to respond to contingency operations, humanitarian assistance operations, or disaster relief operations. It greatly shrinks the amount of time it takes us to respond to those operations as well. And for the squadron, it's a privilege and a great opportunity to be the first to be able to do that. So some of the missions that we're capable of doing would be to provide water, food, and other humanitarian supplies in the event of a disaster or a natural disaster or other event that would require assistance. We can also very rapidly deploy combat troops over greater distances in the event that we need to respond to a contingency. And that's the biggest difference. We do the same missions, but we're able to do them in a much greater range. I think our role will be very similar to that of the CH-46, but at an increased range and a much faster response time to be able to respond to support our treaty obligations.
What do you think?
I appreciate the question and the opportunity to answer it. We comply fully with the U.S. Forces Japan, Government of Japan agreement on how this aircraft operates. We minimize the amount of time that we spend in conversion mode or helicopter mode over populated areas and maximize the time that we spend in airplane mode. There are times when we do need to slow down in order to land, and this airfield is surrounded by populated areas, so as we're slowing down to come in here to land, we fly over populated areas in conversion mode. Another key time that we do it is on instrument approach procedures, which is how we typically fly when the weather is bad, and we practice that in good weather so that when we do execute it in bad weather, both the pilots and the air traffic controllers are proficient at that skill. That takes us out over Naha, about 5 miles over Naha in conversion mode, and that is the typical flight path in here into Fatema for all the aircraft that fly that profile. Yes, the agreement states that we should minimize the time that we spend in conversion mode over populated areas and limit it to when it's operationally necessary. And coming in here to land, it is operationally necessary to slow down into conversion mode over a populated area. I don't know if I could have said it better myself. Actually, I think you hit on one of the great advantages of this aircraft is that it can be flown as a helicopter when it's required and when that's the safest thing to be done, and it can be flown like an airplane when that's the smartest and safest way to operate the aircraft. And we are absolutely committed to flying the aircraft in the safest manner possible, and we vary which mode we're in, conversion mode or airplane mode, depending on the situation, the conditions, what air traffic control is telling us to do. The aircraft has a very long, proven track record, has one of the best safety records of rotary wing aircraft in the Department of Defense. And for me personally, I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old son, and I would put them in the back of any one of these aircraft tomorrow. They're going to be shipped over here this summer. I don't believe that they have set an exact date yet, and I'm fairly certain that the Public Affairs Office will release that information to you when they're able. You really shouldn't see any change. The cycle will be very similar, well, exactly to how it is now, in that one squadron will be assigned to MAG 36, the other squadron will be assigned to the 31st MU, and will spend a significant portion of their time embarked aboard the ship operating from the LHD. So while you will have additional aircraft here, it would look just like 2 years ago when you had 2 CH-46 squadrons here. You'd have the same level of flying going on with Ospreys that you saw with CH-46s. We continue to support the exercises throughout the region, and I think we will continue to expand the reach of the aircraft and the ranges at which we're flying and the countries that we're visiting and conducting exercises with. Yes, I think we will definitely expand the area that you've seen this, in which you've seen the CH-46s operate, and that will be a gradual process. Over the next couple years, you'll see us reach further and further out in the Pacific region as we get more comfortable in the region, as we support additional exercises throughout the Pacific region. I think it will give the 31st MU the ability to project their capability further in a shorter amount of time, but I think their typical operations that the ship and the amphibious readiness group conducts will be fairly similar to what they have been in the past.